Toby Young is the founder of the Daily Skeptic website and of the Free Speech Union, and we are always glad to see him. Toby, how on earth, when you've got like 15-hour, 28-hour, 2.5-day waits for an ambulance, does this sick government think its priority should be COP27?
It is extraordinary. I mean, I thought when Rishi Sunak initially said he wasn't going to be going and downgraded Alok Sharma from a cabinet minister to a minister not in the cabinet. I mean, admittedly, he did reimpose the fracking ban, but on balance, it felt as though he was being a bit more realistic and wasn't going to be diverted by the climate emergency agenda. But then it's all gone pear-shaped. He's now gone to COP27. He's praised Prince Charles, whereas Liz Truss tried to prevent Prince Charles from going. Seemingly the British delegation is taking seriously this demand for reparations because Britain was the first country to industrialise. I mean, It's completely absurd. I mean, first of all, they talk about reparations to countries like Pakistan, which suffered flooding, very bad flooding earlier this year. But the evidence that that flooding was caused by climate change is threadbare at best. We looked at this. I mean, first of all, the notion that a third of the country was submerged because of flooding is complete nonsense. We looked at the data on the Daily Skeptic. It was 8%. And the idea that it was the worst flooding Pakistan has ever experienced because of the climate emergency was also wrong. There have been 4 other occasions in the last century in which more people have died as a result of flooding in Pakistan than in 2022. But even if Britain was, in some weird, elaborate way, responsible for the flooding in Pakistan this year, and therefore, I mean, that's not a reason we should pay them compensation. I mean, the number of people in poverty in Pakistan has fallen from something like 65% of the population in 2001 to 25% today. Why? Because of the pioneering industrial capitalism that Britain came up with in the middle of the 18th century. The notion that industrial capitalism, that engine of progress has caused more harm than good, and therefore we ought to compensate these countries that are supposedly suffering the effects of climate change thanks to us. I mean, the UN estimates that roughly in the last 50 years, more people have been removed from poverty across the world than in the previous 500. Why? Because that economic model pioneered by us in the middle of the 18th century has been rolled out across the world. They should be thanking us, not asking us for compensation.
Well, but aren't you saying, therefore, that on the logic of this cockamamie conference, that because Britain invented the spinning jenny ahead of anybody else, we're going to be stuck with the lion's share of the bill for this climate reparations?
Well, that's the argument. But what they're not taking into account is the extraordinary benefits of embracing the economic model pioneered in this country. I mean, life was nasty, brutish and short prior to industrialization. Human beings made virtually no progress at all. I mean, I think the GDP per capita in Pakistan in 1960, pre-industrialization, was something like 0.
But that's your fault too, Toby Young, because what's now Pakistan was under your rule until 1948. You did that to
under
Pakistan.
The heel. Without wanting to get into a debate about the pros and cons of colonialism, I think that the idea that we somehow owe the world compensation because they've followed the economic model that we came up with, because we've been producing carbon emissions longer than anyone else. I mean, Boris, when he was asked about this, at least had the decency to say the British taxpayer cannot afford to compensate the world for the price it's paying for industrialisation. But he should have gone on to say, but actually they benefited far more than they suffered.
That's not really an answer, is it? Rishi Sunak seems to have signed on to this precisely because we're broke. Rishi Sunak has spent all the money this country will be making till the end of the century in the last 3 years. And so who cares if we come up with an equally fantastical amount to give reparations to all the countries we've wrecked?
That isn't actually the argument he's making. I mean, I think the difficulty with even giving these demands for reparations the time of day, as his delegation appears to be doing, is, in a couple of weeks' time, the autumn statement is going to be published. And in the autumn statement, they're going to somehow fill this 60 billion black hole in Britain's finances by cutting public expenditure by 35 billion and increasing taxes by 25 billion. How can they ask British people to tighten their belts when they're talking about paying reparations not just to the people of Pakistan, but to China?
Right.
They're talking about paying reparations to China, which is an absolute economic giant compared to the declining UK.
I know.
We're in recession.
Well, let me ask you the thought I concluded with. I don't think under Ofcom regulations I'm allowed to foment violent revolution on UK telly. I haven't checked, but it seems likely to be in there somewhere. But why aren't people madder about all this?
Well, maybe it hasn't quite sunk in yet. I mean, it's quite difficult, I think, for people to realise that what a complete scam the whole climate emergency agenda is, because it's being pumped. The propaganda behind it is being pumped out 24/7 by the mainstream media. I mean, Sky issued a report last year, I think it was, saying that it wanted to include subliminal promotion of the net zero agenda in its programming. And not only did it brag about trying to unconsciously get people to sign up to this agenda, it criticised other broadcasters for not including subliminal messages in their own programmes to get people to sign up to it.
Yeah, people won't take this seriously until there's a plot development in Coronation Street where it's entirely washed away by floods caused by climate change. That's what we...
That'll happen.
That's
coming up next season.
That's the thing is, whenever you make a cheap joke, to do it for real, because that's the fastest way to make 10 million quid. So if any Coronation Street scriptwriters are watching tonight, that'll make your name, that'll make your fortune. Thank you, Toby. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk.